Hello and welcome to this program which looks at the takeoff procedure and initial climb procedure in the Q400. We haven't quite finished looking at the systems of the aeroplane. We have one more systems video to do which will cover the autopilot, but we are now going to start moving towards procedural, abnormal and emergency and technique videos, and this is the first of those. As I say, looking at the takeoff and the initial climb in the aeroplane. So as you can see, we're at the holding point for runway 15 at Birmingham. We've completed all the initial checks up to the before takeoff checklist below the line, and the checklist I'm using is the Flybe Virtual Q400 checklist, which I compiled myself, and those of you who are members of the VA can find that on the Pilot's Library section of the training part of the website. Those of you who aren't members of the virtual airline, I'm sure you have your own checklists, but if you don't mind, I will just use the Flybe Virtual one for ease of use. So what does the checklist say? Well, it says first of all, lights have to be set, so we're going to switch the landing lights on, taxi light off, and the anti-collision lights from red to white. This activates the strobe units on the wingtips to make the aircraft nice and conspicuous for when we enter the runway, and they remain white for the rest of the flight. Next, the transponder has to be set, so we have the squawk code of 2000, which is the standby squawk, set, and we line select against the fourth right key of the ARCDU to turn the transponder from standby to on alt. So the transponder is now on, and altitude reporting is selected so that altitude information can be emitted to local radar stations as necessary. Next, the cabin crew have to be warned, and this is done by cycling the fasten belt sign. Next, we make sure that the pitot static heaters are selected on, and as you can see, the first officer has mistakenly switched those on already, and we'll tell him off for that later. Next, we check the modes on the flight mode annunciator. For departure, we need the go around function, the heading select function, and the alt cell mode armed as well. The go around function is selected by using the go around triggers on the power levers and gives us 10 degrees nose up, which is the standard profile for the initial departure. And heading select ensures that we climb out on the initial runway heading, which we will have already bugged on the HSI. Next, we have to check that the caution and warning panel is blank, so there are no faults detected in preparation for the takeoff. Next, you'll want to visually check that the approach is clear and that the runway is clear as well. You do this visually, looking out the window, and also on TCAS. Even if there is air traffic control online when you're on VATSIM as a precautionary measure, as you would do in real life. And then we're free to line up on the runway. Right, we're lined up on the runway now. You can see that the spoilers have been selected into flight, the spoiler lights have illuminated, and also on the PFCS display the spoilers have extended. These will retract and the lights will extinguish as soon as the power levers are powered beyond 12.5 degrees angle. So let's get going. Slowly and carefully advance the power levers to maximum and check that the auto feather arm legend shows on the engine display. If it doesn't, the takeoff must be rejected. We're looking now for 80 knots initially, then the V1 speed, then the rotate speed. We pull back gently on the control column and maintain that 10 degrees nose up, making sure the speed goes past V2, which is our minimum safety speed for the takeoff. Gear selected up once we've established a positive rate of climb. and once we're above 400 feet AGL we can select the LNAV option and confirm it shows on the flight mode annunciator. So we're now following the departure routing as set in the FMS. After thrust reduction altitude, which is a standard of 1000 feet above ground level, the flaps should be retracted to 0 and their position checked on the First Officer's navigation display, and making fully sure of course that the aircraft has accelerated beyond flap retraction speed. Autopilot is selected on and confirmed at the FMA. Next, the bleed needs to be checked on and also selected to norm, and the amber bleed indications show on the engine display, and climb power can then be carefully set to 900 and the indications verified on the engine display. We can now select the climb profile using IAS mode and use the nose up or down function to select 210 knots for the climb out, and then we have the after takeoff checklist. So the landing gear is up, flaps 0, bleeds on and normal, and the climb power is set. Once we're cleared to a flight level, so a level above the transition altitude, we can set it, always making sure we have alt cell armed of course on the flight mode annunciator, and also checking once we've cleared to a flight level that we have 1013 set on both altimeters and both altimeters are synchronized correctly. Thereafter we can deselect the standby hide and PTU controls, switch off the fuel pumps and the auto feather system as well. We can then perform the climb checklist, so the altimeters are 1013. The pressurization system has been checked, so we have an increasing differential. The standby hide and PTU control are normal. Fuel pumps are off, and the auto feather is off as well. And that's the climb checklist complete. Once at a safe altitude and above turbulence, the chime function can be used to release the cabin crew. And on passing flight level 100, we check that the altimeters are still synchronized, working correctly. The pressurization system is working normally, so we have increasing differential, nice steady cabin rate. The landing lights can be selected off now, and now there's no turbulence and we're above safety altitude, the passengers can be released as well. On passing flight level 150, we can then revert to pitch hold mode, which is selected using the IAS mode again, and pitch hold is shown on the FMA. We then use the nose up wheel to select 5 degrees nose up pitch angle, and we remain in that pitch angle until we achieve our cruise altitude, making sure alt cell is armed of course, so that we don't bust our levels. We also have to check in this mode of course that the speed does not decay too excessively. This is very, very important. If speed does drop off too excessively in this mode, then use the alt push button on the autopilot panel to level off.